to force them to say you have to come in 2 days a week. That's too much generous companies. You know, 2 days a week.
I was going to school, you didn't have access to, you know, you didn't even have a computer. And so to be able to have access, I think it's going to allow people to be more educated, learn, and so I feel like I can learn about it. But maybe I have something that someone who's familiar with it may understand paragraph general first thing.
People do.
At a level when anybody so it's where it makes it to grasp the paragraph. Because I had to ask 5 questions about it, but I made it look hard about it. Why do I think that's where the introduction to the education AI is going to change it. You don't have that answer. The professor or whoever doesn't have to answer all the questions. Much more informed decisions and maybe higher productivity.
It'll be a challenge. Australian laboratory.
Should I, different so what is the examples that I had? Kill grubworms. Generally, this is a topical but a below the surface kind of applications to kill grubworms. These are 2 suggested chemicals to do that. So I go to Home Depot and I specifically look for those 2. And I, actually got a little this. So I would get last year, because I spent $100, 5 bottles of something, putting it on the line, and it doesn't do any good. So I think I've got the right application now because I actually had access to better research, better data, what would actually be the right chemical to use to kill grubworms. So something like that would it makes our just the destroy the lawn over time. Every year it's fight. So now that I've finally found the right chemical, I hope that a better lawn. So those are the kind of things we're talking about, better decisions. You're making the right choices. What product to use. We all know that today Google's got the over. I don't know if I've actually used it. businesses that have provided people, but you know, a lot of times I'm asking questions that I wouldn't try and answer, and I don't need to go down this rabbit hole, all these clicks to try to find what that would be. Right? Today we don't have that. Like a chatbot, right? You give you what it thinks is an answer. I'm hearing you, Peter.
Talk louder.
Hello? Okay, it just took a while to wake up. Well, thank you everyone for coming here and braving the weather. So the topic today is going to, I think, be a bit more exploratory. I'm not given this talk. In fact, I've not really spoken about futurism as such in a long time. So certainly I'd be keen to, you know, things that I miss out that we could add to this. Now, because we have quite a lot of new people, and also because I actually do want to remind everybody what AGI really is, I will start again with going over what AGI is, and also a little bit how we can get there, so that you can kind of get a feel for what we're talking about when we actually get to talking about futurist technologies. So, AGI, imagine you had a human-level AI that can teach itself or be taught to be a PhD-level cancer researcher. Now, you could make 1 million copies of that researcher. Imagine what kind of progress we can make with 1 million PhD-level AIs chipping away at cancer and communicating with each other very effectively, sharing information, pursuing different ideas. And you now take that idea to really any field where you do research or where brain power is required, and how we can accelerate progress in those areas. So that's kind of the one major category where AGI, human-level AI, will really accelerate development and help human flourishing. The second area I'd like to highlight here is really dramatically reducing the cost of goods and services across the board, because with human-level AI, certainly any desk-bound cognitive job will be substantially cheaper. And I'll say cognitive because there's some debate as to whether sort of artistic endeavors should be included, and also say cognitive, leaving aside robotics. You know, robotics has its own issues, but there's also a lot of progress being made. So obviously, once robotics can get going, that'll even be a much broader range of areas where cost can be significantly reduced. Now, the third area is actually one I'm almost most excited about, in spite of the benefits of the other one, and this is what I call a personal assistant. And the three reasons, or three meanings of personal here are, the first, personal, is that you own it. It serves your agenda, not some mega corporation's agenda. That's my vision for personal assistance in the era of AGI, human-level AI. So that's the first, personal. You own it. It serves your purpose. The second, personal, is it's hyper-personalized to you. It gets to learn your history, your goals, your preferences, who you interact with, everything. As you work with it over time, it will get to know more and more about you. And the third, personal, is the issue of privacy, that you control what it shares with whom. You know, some things you share with your spouse, others with co-workers, and some things you share with Amazon. So those are three examples of what real AGI, human-level AI, will bring about. Now, when we compare it to human level, inherently AI has a number of advantages over and above human intelligence and human functioning. One of them is, of course, as I mentioned, that it's potentially significantly cheaper than human labor. Secondly, it can communicate much more effectively. It can share knowledge. It can basically do a brain dump in some way where, you know, if one AI has learned something, it can more easily share that with another AI. You know, where it takes us, 7 years to do a PhD, an AI could, you know, dump that knowledge in, I don't know, seconds, minutes, whatever, hours. They can work tirelessly 24/7 without interruptions at full focus. Wish I could do that. And of course, potentially it could also speed up its thinking over and above the speed at which our meat brains, you know, the speed that our meat brains limit us to. And then they don't have certain distractions, you know, nice distractions that we enjoy. So again, it can focus on the actual task to be done. It's going to have photographic memory. It'll have access to really all the world's information at its fingertips. Just by thinking about some knowledge, it'll be able to, you know, upload that into the brain. And it'll be much, much better at reasoning, at logical thinking than we are. You know, for us, logical thinking is really an evolutionary afterthought. We're not that good at it. So that's sort of the background to trying to understand what AGI is and how powerful it is. And I think these quotes here, the sentiment is exactly spot on. AGI will be bigger than electricity and, you know, other innovations we've had. Now, there's a lot of confusion and people abuse the term. In fact, unfortunately, I've had to start writing articles now saying real AGI because, you know, people like Sam Altman say, oh yeah, we'll have AGI soon, but it's not going to be such a big deal. Well, clearly he's not talking about AGI. So the next part I want to talk about is obviously everybody knows about ChatGPT, large language models, that technology, and the hype surrounding it. And it is amazing technology. I mean, what it can do, when it first came out, really none of us believed that was going to be possible to do that. But there is a general consensus now that large language models and statistical models are not going to get us to AGI. It's not just going to be a matter of scaling it up. And, you know, I could list, you know, a dozen different luminaries in the AI space. Just a few weeks ago, Jan LeCun said, LLM is basically an off-ramp on the path to AGI, a distraction, a dead end. And, you know, I would agree with that. Demis Hassabis of Google DeepMind, and he's now the AI VP of AI, or whatever they call it, chief scientist at Google. Again, he says, they're not going to get us to AGI. We need something else. We need major breakthroughs to get there. So the inherent limitations, and they really are inherent, is hallucinations. Hallucinations are a feature of LLMs, of statistical systems. GPT, generative, they make up stuff based on the 10 trillion pieces of information they were trained on, you know, good, bad, and ugly. So you need a human in the loop to always verify whether they've gone off the rails and whether it makes sense. A huge limitation is that they cannot learn in real time. They cannot update their model incrementally in real time. And if you don't believe me, I have a co-author on a white paper where we actually looked at over 200 recent papers of what the state of the art is of people trying to get LLMs to learn in real times. And there wasn't a single example of an LLM, of a development of a paper, where it could actually update its model incrementally in real time. You really just can't do it. They are pre-trained, GPT. And the T is the technology behind it, which is transformers, and transformers inherently lock you into technology called backpropagation, which basically means pre-training or bulk training. So it's not fixable. They're a black box. They're not auditable, which is a problem in many applications. You don't know why they give you a certain answer, which makes it difficult to fix things. You can really only fix it by retraining, and then you don't know what else you broke. Their understanding and reasoning ability is limited. Yes?
Peter, do you think explainable AIs will address the black box problem anytime soon? XAI?
Yeah, so there are efforts in companies that are dedicated to trying to figure out what's happening in the black box. But so far everything I've read about it is they can sort of cherry pick specific things where they can say, oh yes, I found which part of the LLM encodes like a country, or something. But I haven't seen anybody come anywhere near trying to map out the whole thing, and specifically to map out how the reasoning process works. That seems to be, quite opaque. So I don't think it's fixable, but maybe somebody will figure out how they can map it. There are some theoretical reasons as well why I think it's not going to happen, and this gets pretty technical, but basically the way they encode concepts, if you want to think about them as concepts, is not ontologically based, it's statistically based. And that's a huge problem, that concepts really need to be ontological. But I'm happy to talk about that sort of afterwards here. Limited understanding, they don't have metacognition. So metacognition is the ability to think about thinking that we have. It's extremely important, and that's why they don't know when they don't know something. They really don't know what they're doing or what they're outputting. They're just predicting the next word kind of blindly. But for real intelligence, you really need metacognition. You need the ability to monitor your own thought process. And they are extremely expensive. And I've seen quite a number of projects where companies have tried to implement LLMs that have been abandoned once they realized just how expensive it is to train and to operate them. They're also running out of data now. So they can't be made much bigger because there simply isn't enough data in the world to feed these hungry monsters. Okay, so what's the missing? What's the answer? What's the missing element? So to kind of just put this into perspective, human intelligence, by the time a child or a teenager, can sort of really hit the books and learn things, they've maybe been exposed to a few million words, not 10 trillion, a few million. So that's, 6 orders of magnitude less. And also our brain uses about 20 watts of power, something in that realm. Not 20 gigawatts, it doesn't need like new nuclear power stations to try and train these models. So the answer is cognitive AI, and one way to look at that is what DARPA talk about 3 waves of AI, which I think is quite a useful model of the development of AI. So the first wave of AI is what we now call good old-fashioned AI. That's all the stuff that was done in the 80s and 90s, logic-based systems, expert systems, Deep Blue, IBM's world champion chess program would be an example of that. So that's the first wave. The second wave, of course, hit us like a tsunami about 12 years ago, when people figured out how they could use massive amounts of data, massive amounts of computing power to do really useful things with neural networks. And so we are still very much riding that wave right now, now with generative AI, but it's inherently big data statistical approaches. The third wave that DARPA talk about is really going back to cognition, to understanding what does intelligence require. So your starting point is not, we have a lot of data, we have a lot of computing power, that's the hammer we've got, what nails can we find? It's starting with deeply understanding what intelligence is, what makes human intelligence special, and what we need to do to build a machine that incorporates these basic requirements of cognition. So, a couple of things I've already mentioned. Being able to learn incrementally, to make sense of things incrementally is actually very important, because any conversation we're having, and I hope what I'm saying, that some of the sentence I'm saying, update your model in real time or make you think of something or raise questions. It's not that you read a whole book and at the end of reading the book you start processing it. It's as you read each line, each paragraph, or as you have a conversation, it brings up thoughts, it updates your model. So being able to learn incrementally and being able to form new concepts, new abstractions in real time is crucial. So this graph I find is pretty neat to kind of show the difference. So on the one hand, we have LLMs, which have massive amounts of knowledge and skills that are baked into the model. And this can just way beyond a single human, what a single human can do. But what we really need is we need the real-time autonomous, adaptive, conceptual learning and reasoning. The metacog, all the things that I've spoken about. That is what makes human intelligence special. And cognitive AI can get us on that path. And, it doesn't matter how many billions or trillions of money you spend if you're going in the wrong direction, you're not going to reach your destination. You're not going to get to the blue circle there if you just continue plowing money onto the red trajectory. I won't spend time going through this. Most of the things I've already mentioned, but I will share the slides. So if you want to go back and look at this, you can. So now into the kind of the topic of the evening, and feel free to come up with additional ideas. I haven't given this talk before, so it's just kind of things I could think of. But the bottom line is really from the way AGI will foster human flourishing is quite amazing. So really we can go from nasty, brutish and short life into pleasant, civilized and long life. So I have about 7 different kind of headings that I've put these things under. So one of them is obviously medical. I've already spoken about that. You have one AI that trains itself to be a PhD level cancer researcher and copy that 1 million times. You take that across all different diseases and we will make tremendous progress in being able to conquer disease. Accelerating the development of implants, general implants, what Elon Musk is doing with Neuralink and other companies for paraplegics, but also other devices, other implants, whether they're joints or hearing or whatever it might be, cognitive enhancements. AI will be able to help develop these technologies. Organ replacement to solve the problems of rejection. Again, it's kind of a research problem that throwing more brain power at it will help us solve these problems. And then radical longevity and rejuvenation. I actually follow the field quite closely. I get a weekly newsletter, very comprehensive weekly newsletter. If anybody's interested, just ping me in. And it's really, really hard. These problems are hard to deal with the things that break down as we age, as disease hits us, that need to be repaired, reversed in some way. It's a very, very hard problem, and we need to apply a lot of brain power to it, but it seems fixable. Even rejuvenation, age reversal, seems quite possible. So eventually we'll hopefully get to a point where we can choose how long we want to live, where it's not nature deciding that, but where we decide that, oh yeah, after a few hundred years I get bored and I've had enough now, thank you. And I'll turn that around a bit. When people ask me why am I working on AGI and why am I so interested in life extension and things like that, the way I explain it is, I think it's a real pity that just when we're starting to get the hang of life, we've been through a few marriages and divorces, a few bankruptcies, and a few careers and things like that. We're just starting to get the hang of life, and then we die. That's just not right. We do become wiser, well, some people do. So this is a major, major field. I don't know how many of you are familiar with molecular nanotechnology, but it's an amazing field that unfortunately has stalled out. I was, when I first came to America more than 25 years ago, I was quite involved with people working in this field. In fact, the pioneer of this, Eric Drexler, he came up with a lot of these ideas and wrote books on it. But it's basically being able to build machines at the atomic level, so that you can take individual atoms and combine them in different ways and build machinery at that level. And there's no theoretical reason that we can't do that. Biology shows us of basically nanomachinery that is, like our DNA copying and, everything in cells. But if you can treat that like an engineering project and, they actually have simulated like ball bearings and gears and things like that, that they've worked out in theory how they can do that using specific combinations of different atoms. And that will allow us to have nanobots that would be tiny machines, tiny robots that are so small they can go into your bloodstream. They can go inside a red blood cell, for example. They can go inside a cell and repair it. That's how small they are. And they can still have a computer inside them. It's mind-boggling of how small that is. I think we're starting to get an idea now of, where we have, I think there was just a chip that was released that has 1 trillion transistors. Even current sort of computer technology is becoming extremely, extremely small. But this is still like an order of magnitude smaller, where at the moment the chips are manufactured at 2 nanometers. When you're looking at atomic size, that's like still 10 times smaller. And they can be built in 3 dimensions. Nanobots could also be used. They can replicate. They can replicate and build themselves, like with DNA and RNA. And you could create zillions of these things to clean up the environment. Where you have pollution, where you can then have nanobots go and clean up environment. Nanotechnology will also allow much stronger, lighter and stronger materials. So there's the idea of diamonoid materials that are basically carbon-based materials, but they go beyond carbon fiber. Whereas carbon fibers are fibers, but then you get carbon sheets, which are still very difficult to produce right now. But diamonoid materials are basically 3-dimensional structures made out of carbon, and they can be extremely, extremely strong and heat resistant, and yet very light. And of course, additional advances in computers, being able to truly build 3-dimensional computer chips, which will be vastly more powerful, as well as being faster than current computers when you have mechanical action rather than electrical action. All right, now we get weird. Cryonics. I don't know how many of you know exactly what cryonics is, but it's basically that you freeze, not quite freeze, but freeze somebody when they die, with the idea of reviving them in the future when technology has advanced sufficiently to fix whatever killed them, and also to repair whatever damage happened during the freezing process. Now, the technology has actually evolved quite a bit over the years. That now what some companies use now is vitrification, which instead of freezing the body, it actually vitrifies it, which is a glass-like state, and avoids ice crystal formation. I'm actually quite familiar with all of that because I actually ran the emergency response team in California for about 5 years. And so if I keel over, then this bracelet, hopefully somebody will read to call Alcor and have me frozen. Now, of course, it's a very, very long shot. It may not work, but, you know, would you rather be in the control group or in the experimental group? So I vote the experimental group. Have a chance of coming back. But in terms of AI and nanotechnology, first of all, with additional research and better materials, there'll be better suspensions, basically better freezing that causes less damage. At the moment, there's still a fair amount of damage that happens during that process. But secondly, of course, the actual repair and revival. So let's say you died of cancer. In the future, with nanotechnology and nanobots, you will basically be able to then put nanobots into the body to repair whatever damage the cancer did before you get revived. And then thirdly, what AI will also help is helping people to reintegrate into society. Because with cryonics, you know, you might be revived 30 years from now into a very different world, or 50 years from now into a very different world. And AI psychologists and virtual reality creation can kind of ease you then into being integrated into this brave new world. So yeah, pretty wild. But again, if you have questions about that, ask. Energy. I think there are huge advances in energy still to be made. You know, we're constantly talking about battery technology, for example, that battery technology isn't really improving that much. It's still becoming, the cost is dropping, but not as quickly as we'd like. But fundamental improvements in how much charge they can take per volume or per weight, how quickly you can charge them and discharge them is kind of a problem. Now with nanomaterials, there is the possibility of building something that's like a supercapacitor, which is capacitors can be charged extremely quickly, almost instantaneously, and they can also be discharged. You know, they can give a lot of power very quickly. They're also very compact in storing charge. The problem is they tend to leak. They don't keep the charge very well. Now with nanotechnology, presumably one could build better supercapacitors and or better battery technology that will have a much higher density and you know, not problems of overheating and so on. Now, another area is however you generate energy by whatever means, at the moment it's still quite dirty. And, you know, solar panels and wind power are really not a great solution because the amount of environmental damage done to build this technology, and they don't last that long, and then to get rid of them. So whatever you do, however you create energy, with nanotechnology, again, you'll have the ability to filter out pollutants along the production path, as well as when you're operating them. And of course, with AI as well, it will accelerate the development of fusion energy, which is again a difficult technical problem to solve. By all accounts, it's solvable. Otherwise, the sun wouldn't be shining for us. But to put that in a bottle and to manage it is kind of a challenge. And then another exciting area for energy is thermal energy, is basically drilling down into the core, or deep towards the core of the Earth, where you have enormous energy stores of heat, of course, that can be directly converted into clean energy. But you need basically cheaper, more effective drilling technology to be able to drill down that deep cost effectively. Transport, yeah, isn't everybody talking about flying cars when you talk about the future? Well, we're getting closer to those, but again, nanotechnology by itself with these materials that are much stronger and yet lighter will definitely help towards aerial transport in its different ways. With AI, we're starting to see autonomous driving, but the current models really aren't quite smart enough. I do actually have full self-driving, but it's not full self-driving. It's not going to be full self-driving anytime soon. There's this long tail of weird situations where you better pay attention and be able to take over. And that problem isn't I don't think it's really going to be solved until we get AGI, until we have this metacognition where you have this higher level supervisory function like that we now as a human have when we use self-driving cars, where it can say, okay, I can't just work in autopilot, I can't just be driving. When we drive automatically, subconsciously, something happens and you kind of, okay, now I've got to think about what's happening and what I've got to do. So that will, eventually with AI, we will eliminate road deaths because cars will be fully autonomous and will be able to communicate with each other and avoid crashes. Inexpensive tunnels for transport, again, in terms of being able to have more energy and more effective drilling, cheaper ways of drilling to a combination of energy and engineering, where we could move goods through tunnels and basically have less on surface streets. Supersonic flight, love to get back to that. I had the privilege of flying on the Concorde many years ago, and it was amazing. It was really amazing. So I wish they had supersonic flight again. Love to do that again. Again, with materials, you can solve a lot of the problems. And then space travel, the image there is of an imaginary space elevator. And the idea is that you can basically have sort of diamondoid carbon fiber type things that can essentially be an elevator all the way to space. There's still some debate as to whether it's actually theoretically feasible or not, and there's some arguments pro and con. But basically you could get an elevator, and instead of having to go up in a rocket, you could go up in the elevator and be in space and be weightless. But of course in sort of normal space travel, what Elon Musk is doing now with Starship and the booster is phenomenal. But it's very, very heavy steel that he's using. And I actually just listened to an interview he did explaining why he's using steel, and it made total sense. But steel is very, very heavy. So if you could have better material there, the efficiency of rockets could be significantly improved. Food. So, again, with better energy and better technology, more of the food production could be a lot of, I don't know what is feasible, but a lot of food production could be moved into sort of high-density farms, hydroponic type growing of food. We could finally have great artificial meat that isn't sort of produced by the sort of biological process, but rather assembled from atoms, from molecules directly. And to optimize healthy, tasty food that, tastes good, looks good, doesn't have a ton of calories, and is good for you. That'll be nice. And combining that with our personalized robot, we could have a celebrity, each one of us could have our own celebrity chef that can cook up whatever meals we can dream up, something, oh, I remember in my childhood I had this, or this restaurant that's no longer exists. Can you cook this up for me? And, well, no, that wasn't quite right. Well, try a few more times, try this and try that. That'll be pretty neat. Computation and AI, of course, pretty obvious that AI will be able to improve itself. It'll be able to improve the hardware. It'll be able to improve the software. Now, that is typically what people talk about when they say the singularity. Basically, when computers become smart enough to be able to improve their own design, that's typically what's taken as the singularity. And now, a lot of people think that the singularity sort of then goes into infinity, and I think that's quite misguided. I don't think that's true at all, because there are practical limitations, both in terms of how far you can push hardware. I mean, by the time you get to molecular hardware at the molecular level, on quantum computers and that level, at the moment there's no scientific evidence that you can go beyond that, that you can go smaller than atoms, essentially. And from a cognitive point of view, I think there's also often the misunderstanding that people think that AGI is godlike in the sense that it can solve any problem that you can throw at it, that it's sort of infallible and godlike. This is also completely wrong. In reality, in the real world, many problems, in fact, most problems are intractable. And, a simple example here is we know it'll never be possible, I'll say never, it'll never be possible to predict exactly what the weather is in a particular space a week from now, or even a day from now, because they are chaotic systems, and chaotic systems cannot be modeled totally accurately. So we know that things in the real world are inherently chaotic, and chaotic here in the technical mathematical sense, and that basically there are lots of things that you simply cannot predict the outcome accurately. So there will be a limit to what intelligence will be able to achieve. There's also there are certain, I think, inverse scaling laws that as you build bigger and bigger computers, they actually become less effective because of communication speeds, that as a computer gets bigger and the search space they have to go through. Anyway, there are theoretical reasons why having a bunch of smaller computers that collaborate will ultimately be more effective, but a single computer will have a theoretical limit of where it's optimal. So singularity is not going to go into infinity, but it'll go a long way from where we are now. All right, and then just lumped some other ideas I've had, and I'm almost done. We can then maybe talk about things that I've missed out on that you can think of. But with nanomaterials, you could have configurable buildings, where you could have a wall that can move itself, can reconfigure itself. Can be a window, or you want to be a picture or a window or a door or something, and it can potentially reconfigure itself. Some pretty wild ideas there. With robotics, we'll going back to having your own personal, spoke about the personal assistant, that's of course just a software thing. But once robotics gets fully developed, which will be soon after we have AGI, we will also have our own personal butlers, robotic butlers, can do a lot of the dirty work for us. There was actually somebody who recently said, I wanted AI to do my washing and cleaning, and it's doing my art and poetry. And I want it to be the other way around. I want the robot to do the washing and cleaning, and I do the art and poetry, and not the LLM doing the art and poetry, and I do the washing and cleaning. So yeah. So elder care, obviously that's something that is a problem in many countries, Japan in particular, but it's going across the globe where that's a real problem, and how to help elders, how to help them cope. And again, AI and robotics will help us solve that problem. And the Japanese are certainly at the forefront of that. In fact, they have a different attitude towards AI as well. They inherently think AI is a good thing. They kind of admire AI, whereas in the Western world, I guess we've been contaminated with all the Hollywood movies that AI is bad and scary. Designer babies, so they're all already, there's already quite a bit of technology where you can pre-screen embryos for diseases, but there are also other characteristics which is actually already appearing, where you can, personality traits and that you could actually pre-select. Now, people can debate whether that's a good thing or bad thing, but it's certainly technology that will be developed. And then de-extinction, with additional technology, we can bring back extinct animals, which is again something that can almost be done now already, but by bringing down the cost and working through the science, that can certainly be accelerated. All right, lastly, thinks how AGI can help us in the area of philosophy and psychology. Now, the image there is of a philosophy called extropy. Unfortunately, extropy, the philosophy of extropy, isn't really promoted much these days. It was in the 90s. There were regular publications and also regular conferences about extropy philosophy. I really like it because it has the basic tenets of extropy is it's an optimistic but a proactive optimism. So it's an optimistic outlook, but one that's optimistic only because we are going to make things happen. Related to that is basically it's pro-science, it's pro-rationality, it's pro-personal responsibility, and also pro-personal ownership, so that you have more control over yourself, but you also take more responsibility for yourself, using rationality, using technology. So by having AI, AGI, because it's inherently more rational than we are, it'll help us think things through and say, what really makes sense? How can we improve our lives? So I have written quite a bit about rational ethics, on how we can approach the question of what is right or wrong, what is good and bad. If you treat this as a science, if you look at this problem as a science from a scientific point of view, and I think you can actually get very far with that. And with AGI, it'll help us think these things through much better and develop rational ethics. Now, of course, again, AI can learn to be a good psychologist. It can learn how humans work and how humans can be motivated and can help us as our, personal assistant. When we're feeling down, it can help us get over that. It can help us make better decisions. So be this, personal shrink that we have that helps us psychologically and helps us basically become better people. Now, another area that I see AGI being deployed in is to improve law and order, both in terms of a more rational approach to law and order. I mean, there are just a lot of things in, in the legal system that are really quite awful, laws that don't make sense, that contradict themselves, or that are just anti-flourishing. Now, law and order as well, having robots that can really make sure that people, don't commit crimes. I mean, if we consider something being a crime, if it becomes inexpensive to have robots that can, like in the good old days, we used to have policemen walking down the street, especially like in England, where you had the bobbies walking up and down the streets and people behave themselves, If you can have robots and people know that they can't get away with it. I lived in South Africa for a long time, and unfortunately in South Africa, crime pays. And South Africa is not the only place. I mean, there are obviously quite a few places in America now where crime pays. But, if crime pays, if you could actually get away with it, well, sure, why not? So I think if inherently crime doesn't pay anymore, well, that'll reduce it. But also justice. The justice system is terrible. If you're rich, you can afford, 10 top lawyers. If you don't have money, it's luck of the draw, who your public defender is going to be, and how terrible a lot of the laws are. So AGI can help us sort these things through and make it highlight to us the obvious problems with the current system. And once we highlight them, it's going to be much easier to fix them. Now, finally, is governance in general. And it's pretty obvious that we are not very good at governance, at government. I mean, you just have to look at the two people vying for president right now. Are those absolutely the two best people that we can find in 300 million Americans? It seems like a stretch. So there clearly are problems that need to be thought through and worked out, where we can benefit from additional rationality and insight. So that's why we need AGI, with all these benefits that we can get for technology, personal, to have radical abundance, to have human flourishing, to foster human flourishing. The sooner we can get AGI, the sooner we can get those benefits. And, why don't we have it yet? The bottom line is there are very, very few people in the world actually working on real AGI. Because as we've seen earlier, people working on large language models, on statistical, on the second wave, aren't working on AGI. So that leaves very, very few people who are actually working on cognitive AI or some other approach that might actually get us to AGI, where there is actually a clear path to building human-level AI. And it is a problem that large language models, statistical systems, have been so successful in so many ways that they've sucked the oxygen out of the air. That's kind of the only game in town. You want to get funding, you want to get a paper published, you want to do a PhD, you want to earn the big bucks. It's statistical generative AI. And it's actually become a big problem because there's a whole generation now of AI scientists, people interested in AI, that have absolutely no idea of cognitive science. Wasn't part of the curriculum at all. It's all about statistics, mathematics, and computer engineering and so on. But if you don't have that background of cognitive psychology epistemology, theory of knowledge, and so on, the kind of fields that are part of cognitive science. It's very difficult to design a system that is intelligent if you don't really start by understanding what intelligence requires. So again, to remind you, that's the difference. We need to go up that green line, and we need people working on that. So ChatGPT has certainly given us a taste. It seems that we're so close in so many ways. What it can do is to summarize things and write poems and come up with images and music and videos even. In some ways it seems so close, but then you scratch a little bit and you see just how severe the limitations are. There always needs to be a human in the loop, and so on. Can we just, why can't we just get to it? And, there is that taste. There is a lot of money going into AGI. A lot of people are talking about it. So it's a perfect push to push for that. And, here's basically an ad for our project. We've been working on this for 15 plus years. We've commercialized it. We have a team. We have a lot of experience. And we've had a lot of research, several companies, research companies, commercial companies, and this is our roadmap to actually get to AGI. But for that, we need a bit of extra money and support. So that's it, and I think it's open for discussion. Before I do that, before people run away, we do have these parking vouchers here. So if you park downstairs, grab one of these, and it'll only be $8 instead of zillions. Okay, thank you. All right. What did I miss? There must be some futurist technology that you can think of that I didn't. Yes.
Since in the beginning you were mentioning about feedback, I was not sure about if it was your target audience. But definitely I would say that if it is work for non-initiated, it would be good. For people, I would say AI professionals not more acquainted with technology, I would say that they would have preferred less topics and more depth instead of a lot of topics and very shallow. If you would like to come and give a talk about some topic, I'll be very happy to go in deeper. If I had picked just one topic here, or a few topics, I think it wouldn't have given a good overview of just how immense the implications are of AGI technology, and which will enable nanotechnology, and combined with those, just the vast changes that there are. But I'll be happy to also point you to additional more details, like there's a lot of literature I have on nanotechnology, on cryonics, on anti-aging. So a lot of the topics I actually have a lot of information. So if you want to contact me, I'll be very happy to share that with you. Yes?
Yeah, I'll start with a claim and then use that for a question. But here's my claim is that in order to solve these sufficiently hard problems, the system has to have a fair amount of agency. It has to be able to make decisions on its own about what information to acquire, how to process it, what the next steps are, how to do experiments, and so on. So that's my claim. So the question then is that how do you solve the problem of having different intelligences that are in competition with one another to solve problems, and they are basically stepping each other's toes and confronting one another? Yeah, so how do you solve the problem if you have multiple intelligences that are in competition with one another?
Okay, yeah. So yeah, that's a good question. So the statement that you made, just that other people can hear it as well, is that to do these amazing things that I'm talking about, that AGI can do, this research and so on, it needs a fair amount of autonomy, absolutely.
it needs to be able to work without a human in the loop to a large extent. So you give it a goal, and it will then pursue that goal, but to a large extent make decisions on how best to get there. You say, how do you then deal with competition of different AIs? I think one of the things to remember is while we are talking about human-level intelligence, we're not talking about human-like psychology. You know, we're not talking about machines that'll be a copy of the brain. And you know, LLMs are trained with sort of human behavior and human motivation and so on. But with cognitive AI, they'll be trained on the basis of knowledge and rationality. They're not going to inherently have the kind of human motivations of, ego, or having to win a competition or something. So they inherently will be designed to be cooperative because it's a rational thing anyway, that you basically have a positive sum game makes much more sense than to have a zero-sum game. It's a rational approach to basically say, how can you divide and conquer? If your goal is to solve cancer and you don't have ego getting in the way, that you have to be the person that solves cancer, which we humans have, I mean, quite frankly, yes, I'd like to be the person who solves AGI, but more importantly, I want AGI to be solved. But yes, there's definitely that part of me. But AIs will not have those kind of inherent motivations that are really coming from our reptile brain. Those basic motivations that. So I think they'll be inherently cooperative, and of course we are engineering them, and in a way selecting them for the ones that are cooperative. If you somehow get to building an AI that basically isn't cooperative, that isn't working as a team member, well, those are not the ones we're going to copy. Hopefully.
Yeah, I was thinking about the chart you have with the LLMs and a lot of the AGI on top. I think you have humans far too high on that chart.
That one? Yeah. Well, of course, it's not to any particular scale. It's just to show the difference there. Yeah. All right. Yep.
So you were mentioning when you moved here that nanotechnology was bigger than it is now, and one reason for that is because Eric Drexler and Ralph Merkel of the Foresight Institute were pushing a means by which it was going to happen that a lot of mainstream economists rejected. So in particular, Richard Smalley of Rice University, who was the buckyball guy, had a famous series of exchanges with Drexler saying, hey, I love what you're doing, but in the real world, this stuff happens in water. Okay, the real world nanotechnology happens in water. It's proteins and enzymes. And Drexler was like, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to just have this whole new phase called machine-based chemistry. And he kind of lost the argument in a lot of people's minds. However, we're getting better at cryonics. We're getting better at pharma. So maybe you reboot nano as coming out of pharma and molecular biology and proteomics.
Yeah, presumably you're familiar with Rob Freitas?
No.
Okay, he wrote two volumes, huge volumes. He did amazing research on nanomedicine. Definitely worth checking out, and I think he's moving more towards that. So basically, again, for people who didn't hear, the comment was one of the reasons that nanotechnology kind of died was that Eric Drexler, sort of the godfather of nanotechnology, insisted on working mainly with carbon and solids, basically non-organic kind of designs. And the criticism was that all the nanotechnology that we actually already know in biology is organic, basically, and or water-based, as you say. I think that is one of the reasons, but the other reason is that it's very difficult to get funding for long-term projects. And I see a very strong parallel between nanotechnology and AI. That basically AI, the original goal from 69 years ago when the term was coined originally in 1955, was to build thinking machines, to basically build cognitive AI. But then that turned out to be really hard, so what people did is, well, what can we do quickly that, we can ship it, basically, we can get a product out the door and so on. And with nanotechnology, the same kind of thing happened, that the original idea of molecular level, basically going down to the atomic and molecular level that Eric Drexler had, irrespective of whether it was organic or non-organic, when a lot of money started coming into that, the pressure came on from the investors to say, hey, how can we show some results here? And then carbon nanotubes and material science basically took the name nanotechnology, which actually was material science. And so basically all the money that went supposedly into nanotechnology actually ended up being utilized in material science. And that's kind of the dynamic I saw in how nanotechnology got killed. And we've seen that again and again in AI, where people want to build real AI, but then, hey, have some quick results. In fact, I have a term for that. I call that the narrow AI trap. And, I've fallen into that trap twice already with my eyes open in having an R&D company to build AGI, and then the investors want to see results and you commercialize, and then you kind of build narrow AI. And so it's, these are very, very difficult problems, AGI and molecular nanotechnology. And you really have to have that staying power and that vision and deep pockets to see it through.
If you want a molecular machine, you get a programmable protein. That's happening. That's real, not science fiction. That's what's happening.
Correct, yeah, that's one approach. But then it does, there's certainly pros and cons in which way you take. I mean, we're not that robust, So, other ideas? Yes?
So, first of all, fascinating talk. This is really interesting. But my question is, what do you think about the criticism that claims that AGI is taking away human agency and using like a technical solutionist approach to solving problems?
Sorry, what's the second part that you said? That it's taking away human agency?
Taking away human agency and kind of using technology to solve human problems.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so yeah, the criticism that AGI will take away human agency and solves problems that we should solve. Well, I mean, we've been building tools and technology to help us improve our lives since day one. And I think, honestly, does anybody here want to live 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago? I mean, life was, brutish and short. And so we've really used our ingenuity to build technology that'll help us have better lives. Now, it doesn't always work out exactly the way we think it might work out. There are unintended consequences and so on. But this is why AGI will give us a better ability to reason about things. Now, taking away human agency, it's complex. So, we are so used to right now defining, many people, certainly in the Western world, are defining themselves by the work they do. So if we suddenly, win the lottery, basically, that everybody wins the lottery, essentially, that's what AGI will be, that nobody will have to work, then we can't really define ourselves by that, well, not necessarily. I think there'll be a long transition period. There is so much that needs to be fixed in the world. I mean, I could, for example, see if we had AGI and there wasn't any point in me working on AGI when my AGI is smarter than I am, And it will happen because I'm getting dumber as I get older and AGI is getting smarter. So it's bound to be a cutover at some point. But you know, if basically we had AGI now, what would I do? And to me, it's very obvious, is to help spread the technology to the rest of the world. And you know, there are huge psychological problems to overcome, as we've seen with people winning the lottery, and you know, they can't cope with that abundance, and you have addictions or you know, suicide or whatever. But we will also have the help of AI to help us cope with this change and say, well, we can now find other things that we find interesting to do, whether that's helping uplift the rest of the world, or whether it's family things, or whether it's creative things. Certainly, I see us remaining in charge of what we want to do with AI, with the help of AI helping us think it through. There's actually one thing I didn't mention, and probably should have been in there. The personal assistant that I talk about is really more than like, you know, a smartphone that's there. It's really more like an exocortex. It's really more like an extension of your own brain, because we will be so closely coupled, psychologically so closely coupled, even if it's not via a brain implant. I mean, at some point, brain implants will become reliable enough that we will have direct communication with our AGI. But even before that, there'll be very close psychological coupling with the AGI, that after a while, we won't actually know and we won't care whether something was my idea or whether the AI suggested it. You know, it's a bit like couples that have been married for a long time. At some point, they don't know or care whose idea something was. So it's going to be like that with your exocortex, basically. So, you know, I think that will kind of be more seamlessly lead us to developing ourselves as human beings. But these are interesting and difficult questions to anticipate. Yes?
I want to revisit your comment on Japan. Since World War II, I mean, I had a few experiences. Their attitude towards women, human rights, hasn't moved an inch. And now you're handing them artificial intelligence and advanced technologies that can even enable them even more. There's a huge dichotomy in the society. I mean, really, if you visit them, you say, what are we looking at? And so, are we, I mean, Japan may be an extreme example, are we handing humanity a tool where this division between the haves and have-nots and the intellectuals and lack thereof, is this a betterment or is it a worsening situation?
Okay, so the example you gave is in Japan, where you say that the way, and I can't comment on that, I've not been to Japan, I know very little about it, but you say in Japan, the way the Japanese treat their women is still like from 50 years ago, 100 years ago. I don't know if that's true, but for now, let's just take that as a point. Your more general point was, will AGI be a tool to basically make these problems bigger? You know, that basically whatever sexism or racism or, you know, whatever negative traits humans have, that it will amplify them. So my argument here is very strongly that I talk about rational ethics, that rationality, if you have a rational companion that you start to trust, because it gives you good advice, it does stuff for you, so you have this, you know, personal assistant, this exocortex, that you begin to trust, it it will reason with you and say, this doesn't make sense. And, you know, treating women differently doesn't ultimately make sense. Now, that's a long debate in terms of how one gets to that conclusion, but if you're interested, I have an article called Rational Ethics of how rationality can get us to a point understanding what's right or wrong and what will help human flourishing, you know. And one of the conclusions you come to is that racial prejudice, for example, does not actually serve you. It's not in your interest to do that, you know. So there are a lot of things that humans do that we kind of already judge as negative that actually don't make sense. So if that can be reinforced that you're actually harming yourself through that behavior, then it'll make people better. So I see it as very strongly as a force.
The AGI curve is going to be the reality. That
Yes.
general intelligence curve
Yes.
is the future and is the reality.
Is the future and is what?
And the reality.
Yes, so, you know, is it inevitable that we get to AGI, that we get to human level AI? I think it is, unless society destroys itself first. So I actually often, you know, when people say, you know, I haven't spoken about AI risk that people talk about, you know, that AI will kill us all and, you know, that sort of thing. I did have one of the meetings actually focused on that topic, which we have a recording of. So my conclusion is no, their ideas of AI risk, that AI is going to go out and kill us and so on, are quite misguided for a number of theoretical and practical reasons. So my perspective is clearly the opposite. Is not that we should slow down the development of AGI, but that we should accelerate the development of AGI. And one of the arguments here is that maybe we need AGI to save us from ourselves. That without AGI, maybe we're going to screw up too badly and, you know, destroy civilization. There certainly are some pretty scary signs in terms of governance across the world and how we react to different situations. So, yeah, probably we need AGI to save us from ourselves. Or that's much more likely than that AGI will end in tears. Yes?
Hello. Yeah, just a short question. How do you think the AGI will construct our society? It means basically I don't think we have enough jobs in the future how we define work currently, and AGI will just put fuel into it. But our current society is based that if you do good and if you do work hard, then you can earn good. But this will be constructed completely differently. So maybe.
So basically, how unemployment will be handled, is that sort of the question? Yeah, it's a very obvious question of you know, yes, we will not have to work. It's an obvious conclusion that if AGIs and robots can do jobs better and cheaper than humans can do them, then that's what we will do. And as I say, I look at it the way like everybody winning the lottery. Now, of course, where does the lottery money come from? Presumably, there'll be some universal, generous income that everybody will have. Now, in terms of what other income there would be, I mean, there will be people, for example, that, you know, there will be jobs that you really want people to do for some reason, for good or bad reasons, you know. I mean, a bad reason or maybe a so-so reason would be you might want to go to a restaurant that has human waiters just because you're a snob or because, you know, because it makes you feel good or whatever. So you go to a restaurant and, all restaurants have robot waiters, but no, you want to go to a restaurant that has human waiter, as a, I don't know, special treat or whatever the reason might be. So there will be jobs, and of course, raising kids, for example, teachers maybe, there'll be good reason to have that human touch, So there will be a whole lot of things, and especially what I spoke about earlier is introducing AGI to the rest of the world. It will require that human interface to talk to people and to introduce AGI to them. So that'll be something that humans will do. But I think it'll be a matter of choice of how much you want to work, when you want to work. It basically won't be necessary. People often make the argument that they say, oh, we've had automation and there have always been new jobs for people. I actually have an article about that as well, that this time is really different. It's not that it's going to create, LLMs are not there yet. LLMs are actually creating more work because they need a human in the loop. So the more ChatGPTs, the more LLMs you have out there, the more human labor you need to basically be in the loop, to do prompt engineering, to do the implementation and so on. But with real AGI, that's no longer going to be the case because it will not need a human in the loop. So it'll be a very different world, but it's going to take a while for that to percolate through. There's going to be big resistance from professions, for example. I can already see that attorneys, for one, they're going to fight tooth and nail, to not have AI replace them, and there'll be lots of, all the government employees, unions and so on. It's going to take a long time before it becomes obvious that it actually doesn't make sense to have humans do the job.
I'm certain that we will get there, and I think this will be positive, but I'm not so certain that we can adapt as quickly as the thing evolves. Like when we speak AGI 2100, then we have 2 generations who will be not anymore there, so we can figure this out. But on the other hand, it's the speed. That's what I mean.
Yeah. We don't know, how to adapt to the change. It's a difficult question, and hopefully different people can adapt at whatever speed they're comfortable with. But it's going to be a big disruption. I mean, certain professions will just be eliminated, that companies will simply not employ people for something that a machine can do much, much better. But again, I want to emphasize that actually it's something I want to talk about. I think it is important which company or which companies, which groups introduce AGI. I think how AGI is introduced will make a difference. I actually firmly believe that. And the one clear example I can give here is for this personal assistant. If you have Facebook introducing AGI, or Apple or Amazon or Google, chances are that it will not be a personal assistant. The first personal will be missing, that you are not going to own it or control it. I fear that they will own it and control it. So something I'm trying very hard to see if I can influence it is, if it's up to me, we will have a personal assistant. So I think there are definitely better ways of introducing AGI and worse ways of introducing AGI. And if the motivation is purely short-term profit, it'll probably not be the optimal way of introducing AGI. So it's, I'm talking to some companies about funding AGI, but I can generalize it to other entities that might be working on AGI. It's really who you choose as your partner in this endeavor, I think can make a difference.
Another question. This is the same. So the passenger transport you were talking about earlier, supersonic transport, is coming out soon.
The what?
The supersonic transport for passengers is coming back soon. It's
Yeah.
called Boom, the company.
Yeah.
And Kratos made the interest for it. Last.
Yeah, just a point that supersonic transport should be coming back soon. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've had it before. We didn't need AGI or nanotechnology, but AGI nanotechnology will be able to vastly improve on the technology, because even with Boom, it's not going to be super competitive, financially competitive. You know, it's still going to be kind of a real luxury. So, yeah, it's being able to improve these technologies further. Yes?
Curious your thoughts on large action models, agentic models in relationship to where you have LLMs. To me, LLMs is more a method, AGI is more
Agentic, yeah. Yeah, so... yeah, so the question is, where do agentic models fit in? So agentic model seems to be, to me, it seems more like a marketing term than something real. I mean, it's a direction that basically people are saying, okay, we have large language models that are really one shot. So you ask it a question, and it comes back with an answer. You ask another question, it comes back with an answer. Agentic models is basically trying to overcome those limitations where the system can take multiple steps. So you can kind of give it a goal, and it can then, take multiple steps. It can act as an agent. Now, I actually have specific experience with trying to use it that way. And that we deal with a lot of enterprise customers that try to use large language models for customer support. Now, in customer support, that'd be a very typical application for an agentic model, where you have an agent, basically it has to go through multiple steps. And basically what they're finding as well, large language models simply can't do that. And the reason they can't do it is because they're not accurate enough. So if you have a large language model that is 95% accuracy, and it needs to go through 6 or 7 steps to achieve the result, you're down to 60% success rate, and that's just not acceptable. So I think the inherent limitations of large language models, the inherent approach of them, it doesn't sound encouraging to be able to do agentic kind of work in any meaningful way. How about what?
large action models. But large language models, but basically large action models. So instead of basing the model on
Yeah, I'm actually not sure. That's a new one to me, large action models. The bottom line is any of these approaches that are based on statistical, that are basically GPT type models, transformer-based models, simply cannot do any of the cognitive heavy lifting because they have to be pre-trained for a particular task. They can't adapt to changing circumstances. They will hallucinate. They will make errors. They don't have metacognition to think about what they're doing. So it's going to be very narrow applications. You need, you basically, need sufficient training data, and then it can do that one particular job, and it may do that one particular job reasonably well, but it's just not going to be adaptive. And usually you don't have enough training data for lots of different tasks. So I don't see any of these things breaking out of the limitations that are inherent in GPT and transformer-based models or large language models. They're not a path to true intelligence, to adaptive real-time learning.
I wanted to follow up with that. data scientist or a psychologist, but two parts to this. If you take a look at, I don't know if you had a chance to read the paper that OpenAI has come out with, where they tried to understand the reasoning that their deep learning models came up with an answer, right? They had a paper they just published, I think, earlier this month or so. So if you take that, and then you know, when you look at, you're talking about one shot or multi-shot or whatever, if the goal of cognition is to problem solve and have reasoning and so on, we have data from psychology today for 50 years or so. When we weigh that, can we weigh that to where it changes the outcome, where there is reasoning, where there is this kind of judgment that occurs that can get us closer to AGI? Because one, you need to understand why it's doing it, and that's the reason I bring up the OpenAI paper, and then you need to understand how people think, and that's the reason I bring up the psychology today or more of that type of data. Yes. Yeah, exactly.
But is your question of whether that could help to get LLMs to think better, or are you...
To get us closer to AGI.
Oh, to get us closer to AGI. Okay, so the comment here and the question is, can, studying psychology help us get closer to AGI? Absolutely. In fact, I didn't mention how I got into working on AGI. When I sold my previous software company, I decided what I wanted to do, and to me the most exciting thing was to build thinking machines. I mean, I didn't know anything else, and what most people know about kind of robots and AI, and building thinking machines seemed like a really neat thing to do. I spent 5 years studying intelligence, and I think the fields that I studied are actually useful, or I would say necessary even, to design AGI. I studied epistemology, theory of knowledge. How do we know anything? How can we be certain of things? What is the reality between knowledge we have and the reality out there? So I think, and philosophy, there are other areas of philosophy, of understanding what free will is. I actually spent 6 months struggling over that. How can free will, do we have free will? What is free will? And can a machine have free will? And, came to some conclusion. I also have a paper on that. So I think really studying philosophy, I wanted to also understand ethics. How do we know good from bad? How can we, if we don't understand that, how will we know how a machine will figure out what's good or bad or right or wrong? So that's also important. In psychology, absolutely. What do IQ tests measure? How do children learn? How does our intelligence differ from animals? So there's a wealth of information from psychology, over the last 50 years or more, that helps us understand what we need to do to build machines that can think and learn and reason and make decisions and have metacognition. So I think absolutely, I think it's very important to have that kind of background. We can learn a lot from that.
And I think to the point is when you look at the volume of data, that may be 1% of the data that we have. Total volume is around, psychology today. But your point is, what weight should be established? Should it be 30% or something when you're making these decisions? You can weight way higher in these models to give you that kind of make more of a cognition.
So I think when you're trying to build AGI, you have to have some kind of a coherent theory. And as you're building up your theory, you tend to find where the holes are. which parts am I not understanding? And some of them are from computer science, from understanding what has been done in neural networks, what has been done in good old-fashioned AI, what has been done in statistical AI, and how do these things fit together? I mean, one of the things I was shocked about when I first started studying AI is this vast schism between good old-fashioned AI and neural networks. They had their own professional, completely different professional organizations, different conferences, and they didn't really talk to each other. And they were often solving the same problems, but using completely different terminology, and you were either in this camp or in that camp. And when I started studying AI, I was, this is crazy, this is nuts. And, often I could, it's just sometimes it's easier to conceptualize something in terms of neural network or statistics, and other times it's easier to conceptualize it, in sort of symbolic terms or whatever. So I think it's always important to kind of build a theory. Obviously, you also want to build real things and get feedback to see whether your theory makes any sense. But then find the holes and say, do I need to study more? One of the other things that a lot of people working on AGI think about, and Demis Hassabis is one of them, is to be inspired by the way the brain works, neurophysiology. And, is that important? And so you kind of need to struggle with that and say, how much of neurophysiology will help me in an AGI design? But that's sort of a similar question to saying, how much in studying birds will help me build flying machines? There are clearly some things about birds that probably will help you, but there's a lot of other stuff that's completely irrelevant. So it's, you really have to have a theory and then test out the theory and find where your holes are. Do you have some other ideas of stuff I can add to the slides and things that, technology that, will be enabled through AGI that you think is important, neat?
I guess I'm curious, you have like medical and nanotechnology and cryonics and energy, or I think of those as industry in some respects. But then there's the underlying science that drives that industry forward, like mathematics, physics, chemistry. So I'm wondering if those maybe deserve a place in your list, even though they're quite broad. It seems that AGI applied to improving those disciplines, similar to improving a physician's effectiveness or medical in a broad sense, would be quite important.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a very, very valid point that you think them, the headings I've got more as industries or industry applications, but there's underlying research and fields of study, basically, as you say.
If you're focused on cognition, and if we're trying to get close to the way a human
Right,
learns,
right.
it would seem that if you followed that along, that would go more towards the discipline, which then supports specific applications in specific industry towards specific problems or other.
Yeah. No, I think that's quite right in just moving these fields themselves forward that can then be applied to different industries. So I think that's a good point. Thank you.
Peter, I got another one for you.
Okay.
All right, so, every time Jensen Wong speaks, they ask him, when are we going to solve for AGI, right? And if you know his answer, he's like, you know what? We have all, one, we don't agree on what AGI is.
Mm-hmm.
But two, I believe in, being Jensen Wong, I believe in within 5 years, every metric that we come up with through generative AI, we will be able to have super intelligence capabilities within the next 5 years, right? Every measurable metric, right? So his argument is, I don't know what AGI is, but everything that can be measured within 5 years will have superhuman capability.
Yeah. So, first of all, if he says he doesn't know what AGI is, he should talk to me. I coined the term in 2002 together with 2 other people, so...
There's not agreement. How about there's not agreement on what
Yeah.
AGI is?
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that the term was coined, and I think it has a pretty clear meaning. But that aside, I mean, even, you know, to get at the main argument that he's saying, is he's saying in 5 years, by any measure, an AI will be able to do things better than a human. Well, I mean, people have made claims like that forever. You know, we're going to have this or that. We're going to, you know, I remember from 50 years ago, cancer will be cured in 10 years. You know. Yeah. And yeah, cold. So, you know, him making the statement, and, you know, of course he's selling the vision and so on. But I think we are seeing that the current technology, both for theoretical reasons and in practice, has severe shortcomings, and you know, that are listed. And we had a whole session on why LLMs are not going to get us to AGI. Now, he's not talking about any different technology other than scaling up large language models. There's nothing he said that would indicate there's anything other than scaling up. Now, so both from a theoretical point of view, I think there are very, very strong arguments, and he could talk to Jan LeCun, for example, or Dennis Hassabis for that matter. I mean, he could talk to almost any of the scientists working on LLMs, and they'll tell them LLMs alone will not get us to AGI. We don't know what else we need. So for him to make the projection. So, but then on the practical side, LLMs can actually do very, very little. If you look at companies that have tried to implement LLMs to replace humans, they have failed completely and utterly. And almost everything. I mean, there are a few exceptions. You know, if you have somebody who writes up summaries for you, or who makes up, you know, useless articles to put on the internet, yeah, sure, that's been automated. You know, so there have been some.
For CEO purposes, SEO. For interface.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but you know, if you're trying to actually replace most human activity, again, from what I said earlier, if you have a 95% accuracy, any task that takes multiple steps, after 7 steps you're down to like 50, 60% success rate. I mean, it's not useful. There always needs to be a human in the loop. So it's a very, very useful and powerful tool for a human to use, where the human can say, oh yeah, this is useful, I can use it, or I need to do prompt engineering, basically. I need to try this prompt or that prompt, you know, and so you need that human intelligence to make them useful. And there's no reason to believe that that's going to change just by scaling up. So I think I'm very confident in saying that he's wrong.
I would say this. I think, one, I don't think when he answers the question, he doesn't limit himself to LLMs. 2, I would say, I think he has a doctorate in marketing. So he may be an engineer at heart, but I think he has a doctorate in marketing. He's a really good salesperson, to your point.
Of course. I mean, Sam Altman, you know, the quote that I have up there saying, we'll have AGI soon, but it's not going to be such a big deal. Yeah, you know, I mean, actually there's a backstory to that for those of you who don't know. This is really, really crazy. This is nuts. So OpenAI, the agreement that they have with Microsoft has a clause in there that when they reach AGI, their contract terminates. So that Microsoft is no longer entitled to get their technology when they reach AGI because AGI is so dangerous and OpenAI needs to control it. So, you know, is there a conflict of interest there in terms of the board of OpenAI deciding when they've reached AGI, when there is no legal definition of AGI? You know, I mean, that's pretty crazy. Now, I do want to make another point here is when he says, by any measure, it'll be superhuman intelligence in 5 years' time. Anything that you can train specifically, like the law exam, you know, where you have enough examples you can train it, and they're now digging into these papers that have been published, and they're finding, oh yeah, you know, all the answers were actually in the training set somewhere, or very similar examples. So yes, of course, if you can train the hell out of it, you can get superhuman results from it. But I would say, just take the simple test for me, personally, with what we're doing in our company is say, take an AGI, put it into a call center, and see how quickly it can be as good as a human can learn without programming, you know, without a human in the loop. And I don't see us getting anywhere near that.
So,
yeah.
We've had this discussion before, Peter. So two things I would say. One, you know, in the most recent example, they talked about, or they found out how the data that showed that whoever it was passed the bar exam was highly manipulated, right? It was, was it a second time tester versus a first time tester and so on, right? So that's a different story. You know, this is where I give you a hard time on the call center. So one, call center is a position that they turn over frequently, right? And I know you're not going to represent that a call center rep gets everything right to 100%. Right?
Oh, doesn't have to be 100. No.
Right?
It just has to.
I think that's where, when you look at AI, if you offer, I mean, what's the metric? Is it 60%?
Oh, no. I mean, I'm saying, show me an AI you can put in there and get the same customer satisfaction score as a human.
Okay, so yeah.
You know, average human. Not perfect. Yeah,
right?
not perfect. Yeah, and that's not happening. You know, that's not.
It is, or you're not there, or you are there?
With LLMs, not.
You don't think so?
I mean, we are with our technology,
Okay.
with cognitive AI. You know, we. Yeah, I mean, we have 1-800-Flowers, Harry and David as a customer, and 2 months ago at Valentine's Day, we literally replaced 3,000 agents, and customers could at any time ask for a human. There's no barrier that we put in to prevent them from doing it, and 90% of the calls, of the support service calls, were handled by our AI. But it took a massive amount of human labor to teach the system all of the things it needed to do. So, you know, it's not AGI what we have, but our idea of...
The technology of artificial intelligence today can...
It is cognitive AI. So what we've been working on is cognitive AI, but the problem is that its abilities, the skills and knowledge that it's learned in our current generation requires a lot of human input to basically feed it the rules and the ontologies and so on. So the system isn't developed enough, isn't smart enough to learn by itself.
But I think it's distinction. So is it in the training phase or in the actual real,
Training phase, yeah.
Yeah, but that's, you're done, right? So your training is February the 13th. So, do you have the AI model to be able to solve all of the customer support issues better than the customer service rep has been
Yes.
trained for 2 weeks,
Yes.
right?
Oh, yeah.
Gary and David.
Yeah. All right. What other questions? We have quite a bit of food left there, snacks. If yeah, help yourselves. Any other questions, or have we exhausted? Yes.
I'll throw one more question out there. So we keep sort of touching upon the underlying technological differences here. So from your perspective, cognitive AI, is it essentially we're looking at like knowledge graph, symbolic systems, which is sort of the propagation between the nodes and the being fires and so on to form representations of the world, or is it anything different than that?
You're talking about cognitive AI? Yeah. So, yeah, I didn't talk I have had a session as well that we have recorded where I spoke more about the sort of the innards of it. But basically our approach of cognitive AI is that it's a knowledge graph that is being built. It's a kind of neural network, but it's not the neural network that we know from generative AI, because it's a neural network that can be updated with a single input, in real time. But yeah, think of it as maybe a knowledge graph, but it's not just knowledge that encodes in the knowledge graph, it's also the skills. So even thinking skills are encoded in this graph type database. And
so are the ultimate representations there symbolic representation, or are you dealing with sub-symbolic representations of the knowledge?
yeah, it has both sub-symbolic and symbolic in the same knowledge graph. So it totally integrates. So yeah, let me talk a little bit more about the architecture. So the backbone of it is this knowledge graph that encodes both knowledge and skills. And as to your question, it also encodes sub-symbolic information, perceptual information that comes in, as well as symbolic. And it does that completely seamlessly. It's basically they're not two separate systems. It is one system that is capable of representing sub-symbolic and symbolic information. And so you have this backbone of the knowledge graph, and one of the breakthroughs was that we were able to develop a graph database that is literally 1,000 times faster than any commercially available graph database. I have a white paper that shows the benchmark that we did with state-of-the-art graph database. We put the same thing through ours, and we literally did it 1,000 times faster. So having this super high performance knowledge graph as a backbone for everything, which serves as both long-term memory and also as short-term memory. And basically short-term memory is simply the parts that are activated, that are currently activated in the knowledge graph, is basically your short-term memory, and the rest is long-term memory, or the connections represent long-term memory. Then all of the cognitive algorithms that we have, the learning algorithms, the reasoning algorithms, activation spreading, and whatever various cognitive algorithms that we have all been custom designed to work in a highly integrated way with each other, and also highly integrated with the knowledge graph. So to concretize it a little bit is, when you hear a sentence, or you have a sentence input, some utterance input, the system can basically immediately access short-term memory in terms of what has been said earlier in the conversation. What is the topic I'm talking about? Who am I talking to? So it has all of that information available, as well as its reasoning ability to what interpretation makes sense. So as you're making sense of a sentence, you have the full machinery available. And this is in sharp contrast to traditional cognitive architectures, which are highly modular, where you'll have a separate parser, a separate reasoning engine, a separate database, and they don't work together. So trying to make sense of a sentence and trying to parse a sentence, you already have access to the full context, short-term memory, long-term memory, and reasoning ability. So that's the architecture that we have. On Substack, I have a little bit more information and also links to some white papers I have. All right. Well, thank you. I'll still be around here if you have any specific questions that you don't want to make public. All right. Thank you.
You might want to check this out. Which is this? What is this one about? It is not what you think. About rag, you're right? Okay. I'm not wrong, yeah, for rag, obviously. So the title is Reasoning. Okay. I'm not a psychologist, but what's this about? Can you text it to me? Okay. I love thinking about this stuff, but I'm a payments guy where I come from. But no, this is along the lines of what you're talking about. Yeah. They're probing not just the individual neurons, they're also tracing past. Yeah. They're revising the understanding of what it takes to actually that's the data that you right. Yeah. In a way that people don't realize is even possible. Sure. Yeah. Okay. This is 6 days old. Okay. Yeah. Well, the open paper I was referencing is pretty recent too. I've not read it yet, but I assume it's really good. I read the summary of it, and it sounded really good. It's needed, right? Because before that there was like everybody said we have no idea why these decisions are being made. Right? I don't know if you've read the paper yet. Not entirely, but in some ways I think these guys might be ahead of what they're doing. At least what they're going to say that they're doing. Yeah. With the Q-Star stuff and all the other stuff. Okay. What they're doing. I don't know if I don't know how well they're going to be about this stuff. Yeah. Because it's very, very close. Yeah. 512 917 3181. There we go. Got it? Thanks, Brad. Michael. Good to meet you. Yeah, this is. I met Peter before he started this. I can tell you had some conversations. Yeah. Because I love talking about the theory of it. I certainly understand where Peter's coming from. He's been in this field maybe longer than I've been alive, almost. But I love to read about it. I love to think about it. I love to challenge the norms. I think that's where we're getting to. Anytime I would be willing to bet this, like Peter's history, back it up to 2022. There's more money spent on AI in the next 3 years than the entire first 50 years of his career. Right? So, and he talks about it like no one wants to, and this is one of the things in previous conversations he talks about it, no one wants to actually invest in an AGI. They get distracted by the ChatGPT, right? He would tell you recently, hello, I'm Brad. I'm Michael. Michael, nice meeting you. Nice to meet you. He talks about how, everybody gets distracted, and he's got quotes where, they talk about Google and these guys get distracted by, kind of generative AI. And so, because he knows some of the guys over there.
With the advances in reasoning that they're exploring, with changes in transformer models, I mean, you can't assume that things are going to stay the same. I mean, they're innovating constantly.
The whole thing around the whole attention is what you need, right? You know, you need like, do you just need 3 or 4 or more of those, right?
This article says there's 4 things that you really needed for reason, and they address the 4 things.
Okay.
And are solving the problem. So it has to do with how much training you're doing, how much in your training data you have facts versus inferred knowledge.
Yeah.
So if you change the ratio from lots of facts to lots of inferred knowledge,
That's what I was thinking there, right?
It's exactly what you're on to. And they said that's a critical factor.
Yeah.
So the magic ratio is 18:1. You need 18
Okay.
inferred things for every one flat fact.
Okay.
That's one aspect. There's 4 others. I'm not going to spoil it.
Yeah, okay.
But they're reeling on to some major improvements.
I'm inspired to write an article born yesterday.
I'm telling you, this stuff is like 6 days old. And it's just
I am just simply saying, oh, I celebrate only a big milestone birthday that I'm going to send all my family. Forget all that. I'm born yesterday.
That's what it is.
I was visiting family friends in the Bay Area. One of, if you go to Bay Area and you have Indian families, first thing they're all talking about is AI.
Sure.
Everybody is.
One of the guys is actually a team leader and media in AI. I mean, that's so exciting. We're very happy that you're not able to control the privacy issue. Right down there saying if you had anything really that valuable, don't share it.
Did you see what Apple's
Yeah, exactly. That was gonna be my
One of the guys we just hired at my company worked on that project for 3 years. And he worked on the big LLMs and the security infrastructure. They literally start with a vision model that checks the ships. They start at that level with security. All the way up to security.
Sure.
Well, being Apple,
Most companies don't. Apple is like,
but
that's one of their primary mission statements, right?
it is.
and founders will come along and how they will come along and say, we want something like that.
I mean, many definitions of a personal AI are addressed by the
Exactly.
That
It was an amazing announcement. Let's see the implementation of it. It was pretty amazing.
It was slick and it was pretty and it was Apple, but I'm telling you, they're really awesome.
Yeah, and I would say this though, because I'll have to bring the caveat. I'm an Apple shareholder.
Me too.
But I expected that from them, right? Because that's their mission statement. But yeah, you've been waiting. But I expected that because Peter's comment about personal assistant, or whatever. That's what they're trying to solve for, right? And they can say this because I told before they came with that, like, my life, 80+% of my life is right here, and if you can secure it and personalize it for me, then you've solved a significant part of the quality. There's quality of life issues.
Phones, iPads, and
And we go productive.
Yeah.
Did you feel yesterday that Apple meant something really productive for us? Because Wall Street still dragged it.
I would say yes, and
their stock is up today quite a bit.
But no, what I would say though, it went up today because some people came out. They talked about, and I remember the exact example, but they talked about how you could do this task. You're gonna But before that, you would have spent 5 minutes copying and pasting and searching and this, that, and the other.
20 or you would have done it.
Right. And so with the new, with the embeddedness of AI, you'll be able to do it in one seamless ecosystem.
This is day one.
Right? Yeah.
Just think about
Day
what you're
one.
going to have next year, and the year after, and the year after.
Well, at least I'm happy for the people who are wanting to become more productive.
Yeah.
It's about productivity.
It's all about
productivity. Don't forget, you're going to have this on your PC too.
On your
and
Mac.
I'm only worried about my wife because she reminds me, teaching me what I'm supposed to do.
I'm with you. You know, now you have. But you don't have to tell her that part about the productivity part. Be like, I've got so much work I've got to do to train this AI, and I've got to.
That's what I'm doing. Actually,
I got to lift it. I mean, there's like companies that spend billions of dollars to train it, so it can't tell me, you know. One of my old jokes, I used to work for a decision support system, and they use kind of old school AI. And yeah, and I would make a joke in my presentation that, because you would ask this model, you would ask it in English, natural language, why did EBITDA go up? And you would look at the simple model, you look at it and say, oh, well, it's because this did this, and it would, the model would say, no, the EBITDA went up because of this, and you'd be like, well, I didn't see that. But the model was able to, the decision support is a financially based decision support system. It looked at all the variables and was able to come up with the answer. And I would always joke like, okay, you solved this in like 30 seconds. You don't need to tell your boss that this occurred in 30 seconds. You go play golf and tell him, you know what, it's going to take me a few hours to solve for this, but I'll get back to you tomorrow. You asked the decision support system. I hear you. I'm going to run. Yes, we'll see you next month. Thank you. Look at that. Nice to meet you.
Famously said, that's one of these kind of, aphorisms, kind of and on a kind of poetic level, it's a really interesting argument. Like, you're not, so are you writing your pieces? Yeah. Then what? Tough job right now. Yeah, what people are doing is trying to figure out studying AI is but it's not the one some places are separate. your own questions to draw out a person. And that turned out to be extremely interesting. Trying to figure out like why teams what customers want, what success looks like for them, learning from failure, learning from success, this is what it's bringing down. This is all stuff that spend 7 years learning how to pick up and playing like the jobs aren't there. Demographics on the north side of hiring. Men dropping out of fire. There's just a kind of baby bust. They're shutting schools. So it's, it's unfortunate. I mean, I absolutely believe in it. These things are just we're smart enough to pick truly rich parents. It's not smart enough. And then go to doctor. You get a fly, like a doctor. Other than that, like making a good master's, like on my master's, and then I started working. Just kind of like figuring some stuff out. And then I was like, okay, no, I actually really do want to be a doctor. So I did that as a somewhat semi-informed project. I remember my psychiatrist saying, well, the best is always get a job. It's one way of looking at it. What about everybody else? So, I know, that's another thing. It's like how you says says people who reproduce themselves by having their mini PhD student who thinks and looks like them, has like the horse higher belly because, George said that belly is a mini me of George. But how long do you like to think about how with a master's you also some part of software development, documentation, there's a lot of different I don't mean to put her in Okay, so we've got one here downtown. It's just one whenever we want to summer semester of in other words, if you can do something hands-on, leverage what you're learning to try to get a question. And a lot of it will be able to combine tell a story around that's really using what the software development, annual 6, which tell me your name again? Michael. Okay. Yeah, this is Michael. Hey, you see stuff happening this weekend? There's some dudes from Stanford already in town talking about pretty serious science. So a really smart friend of mine is very convinced there's something. So that's the only thing I know about so far, other than music. Well, it's just an acronym. No clue. Right? So that's why this is anything interesting. I roughly double my choir. Maybe 1% like maybe 2%. I still think it's that tag. But I've seen a couple of things that were weird enough that were like, okay, I don't know what that is. God, U.S. Navy pilots seeing some stuff. That was filmed. That people at the radar also tracking, and everybody's kind of laughing nervously. Like, like, what is this? Not that funny. So it's tracking in really anomalous ways. That's the problem. White Planet Criterion Foundation also meeting downstairs today. Yeah, that's exactly what Welch and that team on that. I know a lawyer was saying, well, let's just blockchain stamp everything. So it's not like some digital, but it's like remix. It's got guaranteed on it. So that would be one way to do something like that. I don't think it's an easy answer. By the way, I found your question quite interesting about he's embracing pragmatism. Having sort of build up with layer in, layer together, and that's a minority case. That guy from NYU, Gary Marcus. So that if you want to hear the best arguments for why this makes sense, there's also a machine learning guy, Gary Marcus, who's debated companies, debated most of the main statistical AI and argue saying, like, we need that and we need something on top of it. That's knowledge. Most people don't believe that. That's my goal.
Well, not a lot, but I've come to a handful of conversations. How about you?
I love nerding out on this stuff. I'm a psychopath. I'm working. But I met Aaron. I got there, guys. It was pretty here.
I didn't touch any of it. You told me about like when the conference,
it's really utopian, but these two technological, like it's
that's good because it can be really hard to well, I'm a physics, I need to do this, and I really science and tech.
Usually accelerations. Those people are just kind of they're basically saying what's going to happen. This thing is like we just got to hold on. Yeah, because like whatever we think about it, like we were afraid of it, we embrace it. It's so big that it's we're accelerating to AI or something. So this is like AI acceleration. Seeing it in Austin. So it's a culture. But there's also that there's epistemological limits on prediction science. Poincaré demonstrated that in the 19th century and had Lorenz, whether found what they call deterministic chaos, as a thing where you're never going to be able to predict stuff so far out. Now, having said that, weather modeling is not bad at all. What the weather's going to be a year from now? I'm a weather obsessed. I think it's usually pretty accurate nowadays. It's not going to probably be like 6 degrees. You were here, Carolyn? Okay, so I run the Awesome Science for 2002 and cover story sign up for it. We have physics people. We talk about neuroscience, AI, genetics, linguistics, my I never did more than that. Einstein was a student in the order in the house. And the claim is that Einstein got a lot of his ideas from I don't know that that was claim. There's causation there. It was a great story. But I don't know that I buy that, but it was an interesting guy. I never thought about it. I may not do another one until comes back in like September. We got a really great major guy in AI, co-founder of Anaconda, the big data science platform. He's going to give us a talk, maybe here. That's just right now. And then I was going to do one on mental illness and genetics. Why are the genes that why is it why are they high portions of the why do they negative selection occurs to yeah, it is real. I find that kind of frustrating because it's having like a cultural what if it's wrong? You need to sign up to local form for your doctor to make
I live in St. Marcus.
Have friends who know way more about AI than I do. So I got one of them hired, like, managing this, like, head of AI. Helping her start up from scratch and not making her rapid progress. But he would have, I think, maybe some insights for you. That email address, I don't know what actually got the email I'm not checking that email. Yeah, no, we can. Sure, I would have a good person who would interview that would be more of a subject matter expert. I mean, I've been studying it for a day, but I have not been hands-on. Fun to have smart people work for you that are smart as you. It's a lesson, it's something. So, yeah, stay in touch. Good to see you again. Yeah, you too.
A little bit. You know I did. One thing
I
I'm now faster than the ladies from your wife. And then I gave her a talk about because in the community I'm
Oh, hey, Michael Webb is moving. Oh, he is? Yeah. Could you be in a point of view more that we haven't exhausted? More data, more layers.
My friend wanted to get out of here, and they said, like, hey, we can go now.
That's actually
You'll find out.
to be able to get said, you do it because I told you. It's like, and then remind me
multiple things.
I think Peter left, right?
But there was still a lot of things I could have done. So yeah, it was kind of like